Welcome to our deep dive into Angela Merkel's life in East Germany.
Before the fall of the Berlin Wall.
Exactly. We're going to be using excerpts from her memoir, Freedom.
To really explore.
Yeah, explore those experiences that kind of shaped her worldview, before she became...
Before she stepped onto the world stage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So right from the start, you can see that her childhood was not exactly...
Not typical.
No, not typical. Her early years were spent on this Waldhof estate.
Which housed a diaconal institution.
Yeah.
Which is essentially a religious organization that cares for people with disabilities.
Right. So how do you think growing up in that environment might have shaped her view of the world?
Well, it's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just imagine being surrounded by people from all walks of life and learning to interact with and care for people who are different from a very young age.
Yeah, and she wasn't just observing either.
Right.
She talks about singing Advent carols to the residents at 7 a.m. as a child.
Oh, wow.
So it makes you wonder if that early exposure to community service instilled in her a sense of duty to others, something that maybe influenced her later political decisions.
That's a really interesting point. I mean, it definitely speaks to an early awareness of social responsibility.
Right.
And it might even offer a glimpse into that pragmatic and compassionate leadership style she became known for.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's shift gears a bit. Merkel also had to navigate the complexities of being a pastor's daughter in East Germany.
Right.
Now, as someone who's followed her career for so long, does this anecdote about the class book,
Oh, yeah?
where children were constantly asked about their parents' professions, does that give you any new insights into her character?
Oh, absolutely. You have to remember the political climate in East Germany at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, East Germany under communist rule often prioritized conformity.
Right.
So being a pastor's child, a religious figure in a society that was officially atheist,
Right.
could be a bit tricky.
Yeah. And she almost told her classmates that her father was a driver instead of a pastor,
It's amazing.
just to avoid those awkward conversations.
Yeah.
What stands out to you about that?
Well, it shows us how sharp she was, even as a young girl.
Yeah.
I mean, she was already learning to navigate potentially sensitive situations,
Yeah.
thinking on her feet. And it probably helped her develop those political instincts we see later on,
Right.
learning to choose her words carefully.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Despite this pressure to downplay her background, Merkel excelled academically, particularly in Russian language and culture.
She did.
She even won awards at the Russian Olympiads.
That's right.
But what's striking is how she learned Russian
Yeah.
from children living on a secluded Russian military estate.
That's not typical at all.
Not the typical way
Yeah.
East German students were exposed to the language.
Right.
So it makes you wonder how those early interactions outside of the standard curriculum might have influenced her approach to international relations, especially with Russia later on.
Yeah, it's certainly possible that these early experiences shaped her understanding of Russian culture in a way that, someone who only learned about it through official channels wouldn't have had.
Yeah, and it wasn't all smooth sailing.
Of course not.
Merkel also had her share of run-ins with authority.
Oh, the Morgenstern incident.
Yeah.
That's a prime example.
Tell me about that.
So her class refused to participate in a school cultural program,
Wow.
and instead they put on a spontaneous performance of Christian Morgenstern's poetry.
Oh, my goodness.
Pretty bold move for teenagers in East Germany.
Can you imagine the teachers' faces?
I can only imagine.
It really shows a willingness to challenge the status quo, even at a young age.
It does. It really does. And, this wasn't just typical teenage rebellion.
Right.
Merkel and her classmates were taking a stand for something they believed in,
Yeah.
using poetry as their form of protest.
And there's this detail where one student was so offended
I love this part.
by being compared to a pug
Yes.
in Morgenstern's poetry.
It's a fantastic detail.
That's hilarious.
It reminds us that even in these acts of defiance, there's still this sense of humor and individual personality shining through.
It's fantastic.
But on a more serious note, I think this incident foreshadows Merkel's later political courage,
Yeah.
her willingness to speak out even when facing opposition.
So we've seen how Merkel navigated these unique challenges of growing up in East Germany, from that unusual environment on the Waldhof estate to her clashes with authority in school.
Right.
Now let's delve into her university years and early career.
Okay.
This is where we really start to see her world expanding
Yeah,
and those foundations for her future leadership taking shape.
absolutely.
So she heads off to the University of Leipzig to study physics.
Physics, wow.
What a big change that must have been, moving away from home for the first time immersing herself in a whole new world of academics.
Right.
Did she take to it easily?
It seems like there were a few bumps along the way.
Okay.
She does mention some homesickness and the challenges of adjusting to, that new level of independence.
Sure.
But overall, it was a period of tremendous intellectual growth for her.
And it was also a time of significant historical events.
Oh, of course.
Merkel shares this story about returning home to watch the 1974 World Cup match between East and West Germany.
Oh, wow.
A pretty tense moment in a divided nation.
I bet.
And speaking of the other side of the wall, her personal life takes an interesting turn during this period.
Okay.
She meets and marries Ulrich Merkel,
Her first husband.
her first husband, whose family came from a very different background than her own.
Right.
His father had owned a textile company that was later nationalized by the East German government.
So she saw firsthand the challenges of entrepreneurship in a state-controlled system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it provided a contrasting perspective to her own upbringing,
Right.
and likely deepened her understanding of the complexities of societal structures and the impact of government policies on individuals. But let's not forget the realities of life in East Germany.
Right.
Merkel had to contend with these compulsory Marxism-Leninism courses as part of her academic journey,
Every student did.
right? How do you think she, as a scientist, grappled with being forced to study an ideology that may have clashed with her own worldview?
It must have been a jarring experience.
Yeah.
She talks about a growing disillusionment with the disconnect between the theories she was being taught and the realities she was observing.
Yeah, so rather than just blindly accepting the ideology, it seems like these courses actually pushed her to think more critically,
Right.
to question what she was being told and analyze the situation for herself.
Absolutely. And this critical thinking wasn't limited to the classroom.
Yeah.
Even in her everyday life, Merkel was constantly finding creative solutions to challenges.
Yeah, she tells this rather amusing story about acquiring an apartment in a pitiful state
Oh, yeah.
and then cleverly maneuvering to secure her tenancy despite the obstacles.
She was resourceful.
Resourcefulness seems to be a recurring theme with her.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's like she was constantly being tested and finding ways to work within the system while also advocating for herself.
And speaking of tests, imagine the restrictions on travel for East Germans at the time.
Oh, yeah. Incredibly limited.
But in 1987, Merkel was granted permission to visit West Germany for the first time,
Wow.
since the Berlin Wall was built to attend her cousin's wedding in Hamburg.
What an experience.
That must have been a significant experience for her, seeing the contrast between the two Germanys firsthand.
It was a pivotal moment for her. She describes the experience as eye-opening,
Yeah,
witnessing the freedoms and opportunities that existed beyond the Iron Curtain.
right.
It likely further fueled her aspirations for a unified Germany
Yeah.
and contributed to her evolving understanding of Western society.
So we've journeyed with Angela Merkel from her childhood on the Waldhof estate,
Right.
through her academic pursuits,
Yeah.
to her early glimpses of the world beyond East Germany.
It's fascinating.
And it's clear that these experiences shaped her worldview and laid the groundwork for the remarkable political career that lay ahead.
Absolutely. Those early seeds of her political character,
Yeah.
the pragmatism, the determination, her ability to navigate complex situations,
Yeah,
were already present.
they were all there.
Yeah. So last time we left off with Merkel experiencing that stark contrast between East and West Germany during her visit to Hamburg.
Yeah, just a few years before the Berlin Wall came down.
It must have been an incredible time.
Absolutely. And, we all know about the fall of the Berlin Wall, but hearing Merkel describe that period of rapid change from her perspective is fascinating.
Right.
She talks about this palpable shift in the atmosphere even before the wall actually came down.
Yeah.
There were protests against the East German government, a clear sign that people were yearning for change.
And remember, she had already had a taste of life in the West, so
Mhm.
those events must have really resonated with her own hopes for a unified Germany.
Absolutely. And in her memoir, she talks about returning to Berlin after a weekend away
Yeah.
and finding the city completely transformed.
Oh, wow.
Armored personnel carriers in the streets, churches open for prayers, even tram drivers were lighting candles in their cabs.
It's such a powerful image.
Talk about a feeling of hope and uncertainty just hanging in the air.
Yeah.
So how did Merkel navigate this period of intense change?
Well,
Did she jump straight into politics?
Not immediately. She was still working at the Academy of Sciences.
Okay.
But she was definitely becoming more involved in the emerging political landscape.
Right. It's like those political instincts she honed during her childhood.
Exactly.
They were about to come in handy.
Yeah, like that time she almost told her classmates her dad was a driver instead of a pastor.
Right.
It seems like those early experiences navigating those sensitive situations really prepared her for this moment.
So did she join any of the new political groups that were popping up?
She did. She joined Democratic Awakening, or DA,
Okay.
a group that advocated for democratic reforms.
So she's taking those first steps into this new political arena, using her voice to help shape the future of her country.
Exactly.
But even as she was getting involved, Merkel was still analyzing the situation with her scientist brain.
Right. Always the scientist.
She recounts this conversation with a Polish colleague who predicted that German reunification would happen very quickly.
Oh, wow.
And it sparked a debate amongst her colleagues at the Academy.
Really?
Could such rapid change actually work?
It's a huge question.
They recognized the dire economic situation in East Germany and saw reunification as a potential solution.
Right.
But they also knew it would be a complicated process.
Of course, merging two completely different political and economic
It's
systems.
not as simple as just tearing down a wall.
Exactly.
Did Merkel share those concerns?
Absolutely. She understood that unification would require careful planning and compromise.
It really shows her pragmatism even in those heady, optimistic days.
It does.
So as the political landscape was evolving, Merkel was actively participating in this new chapter for Germany. How did she go from being a member of this new political group to becoming a candidate for the Volkskammer East Germany's parliament?
Well, it happened pretty quickly, actually.
Eh.
The West German CDU, the Christian Democratic Union, saw the winds shifting and proposed forming an alliance for Germany with DA and another group called the DSU.
Okay.
This alliance was designed to win the upcoming Volkskammer elections.
That sounds like a strategic move to unite the various groups pushing for reunification.
It was.
But was Merkel immediately on board?
Not entirely. Remember, she was still relatively new to politics
All right.
and was cautious about aligning herself too closely with any particular party.
She wanted to make sure her own values were represented.
Exactly.
Which makes sense, especially in such a rapidly changing political environment.
Right.
So what tipped the scales for her?
As discussions progressed, she recognized the potential of this alliance to actually bring about the changes she wanted to see.
Okay.
So she decided to run as a candidate for the Volkskammer under the Alliance for Germany banner.
What a bold move. It shows her willingness to seize opportunities and work towards a common goal, even if it meant stepping into the spotlight.
Yeah.
What was her experience like campaigning?
She really threw herself into it.
Okay.
Visiting different towns, engaging with voters directly. She even tells this story about meeting a farmer's wife who was worried about what reunification would mean for agriculture.
It's such a human moment in the midst of all this political upheaval.
It is.
It shows that Merkel was able to connect with people on a personal level, understand their hopes and fears.
It highlights her ability to listen and empathize, even while advocating for these big picture changes.
So she was campaigning for the Volkskammer, but was she also thinking about a seat in the Bundestag, the all-German parliament?
Well, the Volkskammer elections were held in March 1990.
Okay.
And the Alliance for Germany won a resounding victory.
Wow.
And soon after, Merkel was appointed deputy spokesperson for the new East German government led by Lothar de Maizière.
So from joining DA to a government spokesperson in just a few months.
It was a whirlwind.
That's incredible.
Things were changing so quickly, and her talents were being recognized.
But with reunification getting closer, what about her aspirations for the Bundestag?
Well, she decided to run for a seat in the first all-German Bundestag elections,
Okay.
which were scheduled for December 1990.
So this meant campaigning in a new constituency, getting to know different people, understanding their specific concerns.
Exactly. And I imagine people had a lot of anxieties about what reunification would mean for their lives.
Oh, absolutely.
Merkel describes visiting towns and having these intense discussions with voters.
Yeah.
One particularly memorable event took place on the island of Rügen.
What happened on Rügen?
The people there were skeptical about having someone from outside their community represent them in the Bundestag.
It's a pretty common sentiment in any political race.
It is.
How did she respond to that skepticism?
She listened patiently to their concerns and explained her vision for a unified Germany.
Okay.
She emphasized her personal connection to the region, having grown up in East Germany herself. She really wanted to build trust and demonstrate her genuine desire to represent their voices.
So she had to work hard to win over the voters of Rügen Did her efforts pay off?
They did. It wasn't easy, but she ultimately won the support of the local CDU members and secured her place on the ballot for the Bundestag elections.
That's amazing.
It really is. It's a testament to her perseverance and her ability to connect with people from all walks of life.
What an incredible journey so far.
It really is.
From pastor's daughter in East Germany to candidate for the all-German parliament.
It's inspiring to see how she embraced these historical changes and used her voice to shape the future of her country.
It really is, and her journey is just beginning.
Exactly. Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll delve into her entry into the Bundestag, her rise within the CDU, and the challenges and triumphs of her early years as a political leader in a unified Germany.
So we left off with Merkel about to enter the Bundestag in this newly unified Germany.
A whole new chapter.
And she didn't just win a seat.
No, she won decisively.
It's remarkable, really is.
In her constituency, she was officially a member of the parliament of a reunified Germany.
But how do you even begin to find your place in a brand new parliament when you're essentially a newcomer to federal politics?
Well, it seems like she made an impact right away.
Okay.
Chancellor Helmut Kohl, the leader of the CDU,
Yeah.
he appointed her to his cabinet as Minister for Women and Youth.
Wow. And considering she had only been involved in federal politics for a short time,
It was a pretty significant appointment.
that does seem like a big leap of faith on his part. What qualities do you think he saw in her?
Well, she was clearly intelligent. Her scientific background,
Yeah.
her ability to analyze those complex situations, I think that was pretty clear to everyone who met her.
Yeah.
And she had this way of connecting with people from all walks of life.
Right.
And of course, appointing a woman from the former East Germany
Yeah.
sent a really powerful message of unity.
Absolutely. It was both symbolic and strategic.
Exactly.
So the Ministry for Women and Youth, that's a pretty big responsibility.
It is.
What were some of the key issues that she tackled during this time?
Well, one of her major focuses was advocating for the right to a childcare place for every child,
Okay.
which was a huge undertaking, especially considering the challenges of merging East and West Germany's completely different childcare systems.
Right. That's a complex issue even today.
Yeah.
And of course, she was also adjusting to life in Bonn, the capital of West Germany at the time.
Right. New city, new job, constantly in the public eye. It must have been a whirlwind.
Quite an adjustment. And she talks about that period as a time of immense change professionally and personally.
Yeah.
She even mentions this rather humorous incident where she broke her leg trying to buy a book.
Oh, no.
Talk about bad timing.
Oh, my goodness.
But even with a broken leg, she was determined to keep working.
It really shows her dedication.
It does. And it was also during this time that she met her current husband, Joachim Sauer.
Oh, right. A quantum chemist.
So even amidst the demands of her political life, she was building a strong personal life as well.
That's lovely.
It's nice to see how people in these high-profile positions find that balance.
Yeah.
So she served as Minister for Women and Youth until 1994, when she took on a new challenge.
Oh, yes.
Minister for the Environment, Nature Conservation, and Nuclear Safety.
That's quite a mouthful.
At a title.
And a very important portfolio, especially given the growing concerns about climate change and the legacy of the Chernobyl disaster.
Oh yeah, which happened just a few years before.
Exactly.
And Chernobyl must have had such a profound impact on the public perception of nuclear power.
Oh, absolutely. It created this widespread fear and distrust.
So how did that shape the political landscape surrounding environmental issues at the time?
Well, Merkel was facing this real dilemma.
Yeah.
How do you ensure energy security for a nation
Right.
while also addressing those very legitimate safety and environmental concerns?
So it's a balancing act.
It really was.
So how did she as a scientist approach these really complex issues?
Well, she really emphasized the importance of scientific evidence and international cooperation when it came to tackling those environmental challenges, and she also championed policies aimed at promoting renewable energy sources
Okay.
and reducing Germany's reliance on fossil fuels.
It sounds like she was ahead of the curve in recognizing the urgency of climate action.
It was.
But I imagine that nuclear power issue was a particularly tricky one to navigate.
Oh, it was.
Yeah.
She had to deal with the complexities of nuclear waste disposal, the safety of existing power plants, and, the pressure from all these different interest groups.
It sounds like a lot.
It required a delicate balance of pragmatism and principle.
Now, while she was making her mark on environmental policy, Merkel was also steadily rising within the CDU.
Those leadership qualities were becoming more and more apparent.
And so she was intelligent, capable, and a strong advocate for her beliefs.
It was really only a matter of time before she took on a bigger role.
And that moment came in 1998, when the CDU suffered a significant defeat in the federal elections,
Oh, right. Helmut Kohl stepped down as this party leader.
and Merkel saw her opportunity.
She decided to run for the leadership of the CDU,
Yeah.
and she won, becoming the first woman to lead the party.
A historic moment.
It was, but she faced a real uphill battle.
Yeah, the party was in disarray after so many years in power, and public trust had really eroded.
It was a tough situation.
So how did she approach this task of rebuilding the CDU?
Well, she focused on modernizing the party's image, promoting younger leaders, and emphasizing policies that would appeal to a broader electorate.
It was time of cleaning house and setting a new course.
It was, and she was also dealing with that major financial scandal that had rocked the party.
Oh, right.
So she had to show a real commitment to transparency and accountability.
And it couldn't have been easy, but she steered them through a turbulent period.
She did, and her efforts paid off.
They did.
In 2002, Merkel was nominated as the CDU-CSU candidate for chancellor.
A real turning point.
She was now on the path to potentially becoming the first female chancellor of Germany.
And the rest, as they say, is history.
It is.
We've seen Angela Merkel's extraordinary journey.
From a young girl in East Germany to a major figure on the world stage.
It really is a testament to her resilience, her intelligence, her ability to adapt and evolve in the face of some extraordinary circumstances.
Absolutely.
So it's been an incredible deep dive into the life of Angela Merkel.
It has.
We hope you've enjoyed this journey with us and that it's given you a new perspective on this remarkable leader